Hello and welcome to Behind the Groove. My name's James Sayer. I'm a singer-songwriter based in London in the UK. And during this series, I'm going to be chatting with some of the finest session musicians, live musicians, producers, mix engineers about their time working in the industry. I've been lucky to work with lots of these musicians and producers over the last couple of years. I'm going to ask them all the stuff I wanted to know. I love the studio. I love the old school way of recording. So it will be a bit old school. So I hope it appeals to a few people. So let's crack on. I hope you enjoy it. And there ain't no going back. And you can believe that. Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, no problem, man. Great to see you. Wish I could be in the flesh in the studio, moving some air and making some music. But hey, that's a way off yet, I think.
Well, it's a real honour anyway.
Excuse the lockdown beard. It's 2 months now.
It's looking good.
I went early on the lockdown. I'm not going to. It's crazy. I've never had a beard like this in my life. But yes,
keep growing it. Keep growing it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. No, it's all right. It's okay.
But anyway, it's a real honour to have you. I'm just going to name some of the artists that you've played with and recorded with in the studio. I think I'm correct. Van Morrison, Tom Jones, Brother Strutt, Randy Crawford, Paul Carrick Seal, Shirley, Bassey, Alison Moyet, Lulu, Aretha Franklin, Hamish, Stuart. I mean, that's some list. So how did this start for you, and how did music first enter your life?
Okay, well, my dad, who's not with us anymore, he was a piano player,
right?
Professional piano player. And when I was 13, he said to me, I don't remember this, but he said, I asked him, I wanted to play the drums, and he thought, if you have drums, you have all the band in your house. So that's the worst. So he said, why don't you play bass? And if you get it good enough, you can come out and play with me. Because he used to do like weddings and little dinner dances. There used to be loads of little function gigs where you didn't really, I mean, the standard was clearly appalling because I started playing. Anyway, he bought me a bass guitar when I was 14. And I just got completely into it. In fact, it was an absolute revelation for me because even though I was kind of bright, I was at a grammar school and I was really good at arts, but nothing really was a passion for me. Sure. And as soon as apart from music, which was as a listener, bought me a bass guitar, and suddenly the weight of life was taken from my shoulders because I realised I didn't have to grow up at all. I could just play music. And wherever it led me, that was what I was going to do. So he bought me a bass at 14, and at 15 I did my first gig with him and a drummer. And I was very lucky because inside the bass guitar case, I haven't got the case, there's this shiny Japanese copy of a Gibson, and there was a book on how to read music. And so right on the ground floor, I learned to read music, which is because I didn't go to college. So I learned on the job, but I didn't get good enough on the bass guitar that when you open a book and try and sight read, it is really boring if you've already got the strap at the right height and you're throwing some shapes. So I was very lucky like that, and that's led me to where I am today. I mean, when we do our sessions together, you write a part out for me, and it's done. You know what I mean?
Well, look, you've already answered my next question because I was going to say, was it the bass that you first started playing, and can you remember what your first bass was?
Yeah, okay. Well, it was a semi-acoustic copy of a Gibson EB, one of those EB1s or something. It had one pickup, and it was a Japanese, like a copy. It was by a company called Gren, Grenn. I've never heard of them before or since. Right. I wish I still had it. I sold it to a mate of mine at school for 30 quid.
Wow.
When I got my first Fender, but that was my first, and I didn't have an amplifier, so I started playing with a plectrum because that's the only way I could get a noise out of it. Unfortunately, because it was semi-acoustic, you could hear it, but with fingers, you just couldn't hear it. So for the first 5-6 years, I played with a plectrum.
So you had the plectrum.
And then then got into playing with fingerstyle and slapping and all that sort of nonsense.
Sure. And presumably, at a young age, was listening to records a big thing for you? Because it's quite interesting for me, because records aren't so big anymore. I mean, they're kind of making a bit of a comeback. But back then, presumably, you could read all the credits. You could read all the credits in the sleeves. So did that have an influence on you on finding your inspirations, you know, the bass players that you liked and the other musicians you liked?
You know what? The great sadness of the modern age is that, first of all, there's music everywhere. You don't have to pay for it. You can have the most incredible record collection for, I don't know, under 50 quid downloading.
Yeah.
Like in my day, lad, I'll tell you what it was like. It was an incredible experience because they were quite expensive. You bought an LP not very often. There was Top of the Pops on a Thursday night. There was the radio, and there was your mates' record collections, and you talked about music and the effect that watching artists on Top of the Pops on a Thursday night was the, I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine now, but I'm talking about early 70s, when music first came. I first started to notice the hit parade.
Sure.
And of course, you know, singles and stuff. I was a massive Slade fan. I've still got all the Slade singles, T-Rex and stuff.
I'm from
like
Birmingham,
that.
of course. I'm from Birmingham. I'm from Birmingham, so
yeah. Boston,
yeah,
Boston.
exactly. Yeah.
No, I absolutely loved. I loved Slade. I mean,
wow.
they were. I mean, even today, I bought Slade Alive, their famous live album, double CD, and it's got their set at Reading where they just killed it because they were a great band, you know. But I can't undersell how amazing it was to get an LP in your hand. What you just said, it's like you've got all the credits. Now, when I started, of course, my dad had a record collection, and I started listening to jazz with him. And as soon as I started playing with him, we used to get in the van and go to gigs together. And for a good 4 or 5 years of my first formative years playing the bass, we used to buy LPs together, tape them, and put them in the cassette in the car. We'd listen to music. He'd play me Jerry Mulligan, and I'd bring Herbie Hancock funk things in, and we really, it was an amazing. I had an amazing relationship with my dad. He was like my best mate.
Wow.
And we had right up until he died. I played in his big band. He ran a jazz big band for 30 years.
Wow.
And he was quite a character, an interesting father.
Okay.
A fantastic guy to be around musically, you know. So it was amazing. And of course, you're quite right. The credits, because he only had one LP, certainly only a month, because I was 15, you know, I can't remember. So, you know, I bought, funnily enough, the first Ace album with Paul Carrot with How Long On. That was the second album I ever bought. The first album was Tubular Bells, £2 off of Kitchen Market.
Oh, wow.
You know, and unfortunately, I had a great conversation with Paul Carrot. Have you met him?
I've never met him. I'm a big fan.
Okay, he's the most fantastic, down-to-earth northern, dour northern, lovely geezer.
Right.
And he didn't mind me at all gushing about the fact that his was the second album I ever bought. But so that was, and I tried to play along with that. All sorts of things. I mean, you got to remember, when I was 13, was the height of Philadelphia soul, which is my favourite music.
Right.
And I mean, all those incredibly lush orchestral Tom Bell, Gamble and Huff productions. What a thing to have. You'd have that on, then you'd have the Rolling Stones on. And if you went to a disco in those days as a young person, they'd play Brown Sugar, and they'd play all those fantastic disco records. You know, so you got reggae, of course. Another thing, early mid 70s was a fabulous time for British reggae, and the influx from Ireland, Chris Blackwell's Island Records, bringing those sort of things in. Early Bob Marley, but also early kind of ska and lovers rock, what they call now. You know, Ken Booth and all that. I loved all those sort of things. And also, where I used to live in my dad also ducked out of the music business every now and again, and tried to go into business. And made a lot of money for a short time, then went completely bust. He was hopeless. Anything other than playing the piano, bless his heart. But we used to live in this massive house opposite Hitchin swimming pool and next to Hitchin Football Club, which was like absolute bliss for me as a footballer and a sports person. And they used to have a disco every Wednesday night. On my bedroom window, I could hear all those things, the Liquidator, David Hadsall Collins, and oh man, you know, all that record was all going in, and T-Rex and all that. So it was a really vibrant time for music.
I presume, because one thing I've noticed about you, and I wrote down to ask you actually, was something that amazes me about you is the amount of genres you're able to play, and you can play them incredibly well. But presumably it's all from that era of music. You've got jazz, you've got funk, you've got soul, probably a bit of rock and roll maybe, and you've got all those styles. And because I found that not all musicians can do that. You often find there's some jazz musicians that can just play jazz.
Sure.
Some pop musicians can't play.
Sure.
You know, so you can kind of do both, I think.
But I think, if I'm honest, if you were to ask me what sort of musician I am, I mean, that's quite a good question to ask any musician who's done a lot of things. Their answer will be quite telling, because if you ask me what sort of musician I am, I always wanted to be, from the time I started playing, I wanted to be a session musician.
Right.
And it's not like a session musician these days means that you're freelance, right? But I mean, a session musician in my day, and still to the people I hang out with, means a studio musician. And in order to be a studio musician, first of all, you have to be able to sight read music. You put a piece of music in front of you, you have to play it well, if not perfect, the first time. And then in my genre, my era of sessions when I started playing, you had a piece of music in front of you, you ran through it once, and they put the red light on, and you had to play it perfectly. No one's going to stop for you. So I trained myself to that. So if you ask me what sort of musician I am, I am a studio musician. And that's not to say I don't love playing live, because I always have done, still do, go and play for nothing, get the gear in my car, drive hundreds of miles for no money. I love it.
Absolutely.
But that's what I do now. When you're going to be a studio musician, especially when I started, you really had to be able to do everything. Yeah. And I mean, fortunately, I love all music. You know, my record collection is unreal. It's full of weirdness, full of sappy things, full of things that people would go, "What are you listening to?" But in order to be a studio musician, which is what I always wanted to be and still do, is you have to go and play on people's songs. Sometimes they're not very good, but you have to bring the music out of it, and you have to give your love of music to it. If you go in with a sour face, and I've seen it so many times,
I can imagine,
some people are not very nice when they put their music in front of you, or they give you their tape, and they don't know how to deal with you, and it comes from their insecurity. I mean, you have to have a tough skin for that. But you have to extract the music, and I've always been. It's natural to me to enjoy everything, so I don't ever have a sour face. Rarely have a sour face about anything, and I carve my way through it. And hopefully, my love and my energy that I put into anybody's track will last, and I might get booked again. You never know.
That's why I always ask you first, Steve, every time, because you put that passion in every time.
Bless you.
Presumably, you've got all this music in the 70s that you're loving. You've got disco, funk, soul, jazz. Yeah. And you obviously worked. You presumably played in the pubs and the clubs. You played with your dad.
Yeah.
So what was your memory of your first big session? And you thought, wow, okay, I'm really doing this now.
Okay, well, I mean, I as I said, I didn't go to college, but I used to do a gig when I was 17. I used to do a gig with my dad in a nightclub in Wembley.
Oh wow!
6 nights a week, and we used to do a little set first. Yeah. And then for while people were eating, and then there was a cabaret. So, and the drummer was the drummer in the BBC radio orchestra, and he used to take me on sessions. And I used to sit next to him and learn, keep my mouth shut and my eyes open, and that was my college. And really, the first session I did was with my dad. It was one of the, if you were a cabaret act in those days and you wanted to make an album, you booked a band, like a quartet, and you used to go in the studio and do 12 tracks in a day for an LP.
Yeah.
And that was my first proper session. And funnily enough, it was in a studio in Nottingham called Porcupine Studios, which is still there, funnily enough. And I went there not so long ago, 40 years later. It's about 40 years later.
Wow.
And I remember the feeling of being very scared, but extremely excited, and wanted to know what a DI box was, whether my sound was good, all aspects of what you're supposed to provide as a session musician. So that was a big one. And then I used to do little things. I mean, you did little gigs, and they led to this, they led to that. And I remember doing a really dodgy pub in Hoxton called the Bacchus. And it had the piano player was unbelievably camp, flamboyantly camp, and not very good, really not very good. And so, but it was hilarious. I think it was 15 quid a night or so. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And the drummer, who I knew from when I was very young, and there used to be a big orchestra at the Talk of the Town, which is the Hippodrome now. Yeah, that was a very famous place for cabaret, dinner, cabaret club. Yeah. And the drummer there was a guy called Bobby Worth, and he's a great friend of mine. He's still around, and we're both sitting in this pub, the three of us. The governor thought he was Frank Sinatra. It was the whole 9 yards. The intro to New York, New York. Terrible piano player. I mean, it was a nightmare. We just laughed, Brilliant. Anyway, I hadn't seen Bobby since for a few years, and he said, "Do you want to do? What are you doing in May or whenever it was?" I said, "Well, nothing really." He said, "Well, do you want to do a tour with Buddy Greco?" And I went, "Yeah, man." Do you know Buddy Greco? He's like an old style, one of the sort of like a minor Rat Pack guy. He had a few hits and that. Yeah. A very groovy guy. And so basically, if I'd have had a sour face on that gig and was miserable, then the drummer might not have asked me. But I still always tried to get the music out, and it led to all sorts of things. And that's
I think you touched on this a while ago, but presumably there must have been so many sessions you turned up not knowing what to expect. What kind of personality do you think you have to be able to just go into the studio and play the part with conviction, but also make it believable? What would you say?
Okay, well, that still happens for a start. I mean, you send me tracks beforehand. Yeah. I have a quick listen. I know I'm confident enough now, and I know you're a groovy, cool sort of geezer. So, and we can take. I don't want to nail everything down, sit at home and work everything out. I want to leave something to keep the greasiness when we get together and play, because that's where the magic comes from. But I'll do lots of film sessions. Yeah. And you don't ever know what you're going to do. And in more and more these days, people panic, and because they're not orchestrators, they're guys who write the charts out on keyboards, and they don't really know what a bass guitar does or a double bass, or they want my input. So more and more you do know. But I mean, for many years, you never got a clue of what you were going to play. Yeah. But if you're going to talk to Ian Thomas as well, and what we do, that part of us is going and playing down the 606 and having great fun. Sometimes we come on your sessions where we throw a few things around, try a few things, get a performance and all that. But I mean, I would say no. Well, I don't know what the percentage is, but because I've worked with Yanto for so many years, but we very often go on things where it's just you get your head down. And it means I don't know what other people's perception of me is, but certainly in order to do that sort of work, you have to be a certain sort of person. In fact, I was thinking about this in the shower this morning. Right. I was laughing to myself because I always use one phrase whenever that something goes off. Not necessarily when I'm there, but you hear about somebody losing it, or on a session or on a gig or
Yeah.
whatever, or people moan and groan or whatever. And I always just say to them, this business is not for everyone. It doesn't suit everyone, you know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very,
And,
very
I mean,
true.
if, for example, I've been disappointed, I haven't been booked for something, or I haven't been booked again for something, and I've gone, wow, I wonder what I did there.
Yeah.
I think the really important thing is to have a look in the mirror and go, well, yeah, that's why. You know, there's generally a reason why.
Right.
You know, music's an amazingly karmic
Yeah.
living profession. In fact, it's instantly karmic, as in lots of places.
Yeah.
You always end up where you're supposed to be, and it's for me, it's happened many times where I've turned up and instantly I've gone, this is not, I'm not going to get on with this bloke, I'm not going to get on with this girl singer, I'm not, however much
Or the manager that's in there.
I try, I know what they think. I'm a session musician. I've got no feel because I read music, and you know, I mean, you can't fight that. So you just have to do your best, really. And it's, you know, over the many years, that's happened to me a few times. But you just have to go, you know what, I did my best. And I mean, there's one or two occasions where I've come away thinking I should learn from that, because how I handled that, it was to do with somebody's nerves, and I was either, well, not impatient, but I think, well, we have to be a diplomat and God knows, nursemaid and God knows what else, because music's a magical thing, isn't it? There's only 5 geezers in a room.
Absolutely,
We're doing what? What are we doing? How do we do this? You know?
Well, I remember my first experience. I hadn't done much recording before working with yourself, and my first proper session, really, in the UK, in London, was with you, Yanto, Ross Stanley, and Robbie McIntosh. I was so nervous because I'd never played at this level before, and I was completely out of my depth working with the guys.
We were helpful though. We didn't make you nervous.
Well, that's
you made you nervous.
I was nervous, but what I was about to say is that you all came across, and still do, as just very humble. You were very helpful and very kind to me, and which is why I really enjoy working with you. And the one thing I'd say, I'm not going to swear on this, but I think neither of you or Yanta, there's just no BS at all with you. You lay it down. You lay it down. There's no name dropping or anything, and I love that. You know,
I was just about to say, it's about the music.
Yeah,
you're serving the music. You're not serving yourself. Your ego. If you want to be a solo artist, then you're serving yourself. You're the one who's allowed to get. You know, say this, say that's not working, that's not working. Well, I guess we're allowed to say that it would be better doing it this way. But actually, above all of us, you have to serve the music. That's your gift, and you should look after it. That's all why I was thinking.
So aside from the studio, obviously we're in lockdown now. So what's your current home studio setup? Because I know you've started recording from home, and do you enjoy recording from home?
Well, you know what? About 10 years ago, I was writing my own library music, and I was pretty good on Logic, actually. I was buzzing around doing editing and doing that, and I really liked it because it appeals to my OCD, anal retention problem. You know, where I like things to be, you know what I mean? Well, no, but you know, I mean, one of the reasons, going back to what about so many genres I play, I'm kind of analytical, so I analyze why that sounds so good, why that note was that length, that makes it amazing. That player's always, you know, Anthony Jackson or Chuck Rainey or Abel Boreal or something. They all play bass notes that are of you know, where they stop the note has floored me on many occasions. So I'm very analytical about that sort of thing. So Logic's perfect for me. But I was doing it this morning. I was supposed to finish this track this morning. I'm not supposed to. I have time to do it, but I thought I was going to finish it before I came to speak to you. And I got my head up my butt so badly about crossfades and God knows. So I'm going to revisit that later on. But so I had some chops 10 years ago, and then I didn't do it, and then so I've come back to it. I mean, I thought what happened was about 5 weeks ago, I got phoned to do an online album. Because I've never had to bother about it. A lot of people really like doing it, and I've never had to bother. I've always just turned up at studios and done that sort of thing. But here we are, and one of the greatest phrases, pop pickers, is adapt or die. Because I've done it myself. I used to. I only played bass guitar up until 1996, and then I started playing double bass. And
I didn't know that.
I adapted, you know.
Wow, how
fantastic. Adapted to that, and I work. In fact, I practice that more than bass guitar, right. And I have a love for that as well, which is a completely different animal. But adapt or die, and that's what I did. My little setup here is basically Logic. You know, exactly the same sound as I give you when I do your tracks. You can have down the phone line. You know, so it's really easy to do bass. I've just bought a nice mic, an Aston Stealth, which is fantastic for putting on my valve amp, my Ampeg Portaflex.
Oh wow!
And also really good for recording double bass. So it's very easy for me because I'm a monophonic instrument, you know, and I don't rely on acoustic room sound. I mean, I could go heavily into moving my double bass all around the room, but it'll be fine. It'll be fine, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds. And where can people find more about that out, Steve? Have you got a website, or is it just via Facebook?
I don't know. I've never had a website. No.
Okay, right, yeah, that's fair enough. So, moving on, I'm such a big fan of Van Morrison, and I know you've played with him on numerous occasions, and you've also recorded with him.
Yes,
what was that like?
It was very funny. The first time I worked with Van was I did a mime on Wogan, the Wogan TV show, for a single that I wasn't on, and the bass player had just left.
Okay.
So, and the other people in Van's band were mates of mine.
Right. Okay.
And they wanted me on the gig, so I walked into the gig really. And Van's not one of those people, you know. It's a revolving door. I've actually been in and out of his band twice, I think, 3 times, and worked with him. Whatever. You know, there's no such thing as having the Van Morrison gig. You do it for a bit, and then you don't do it. And then what did I do? I did do a little sort of audition thing, really. And that's more to do with whether you can handle his weirdness, really. And he's not. That sounds unkind, but, as I said to you, you know, when all those pub gigs, where you have to busk an old jazz standard that you don't know, and someone sings it in a different key, and you have to use your ear. They were like absolutely magnificent training for doing
with Van.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And, let me think. I did the album first, that's right. Anyway, he records all the time, and he booked me to go to Woolhall Studios, which was owned by Tears for Fears then, Bath. And it was one of my first experiences of being in a residential studio and at the top level, you know. I mean, Van Morrison, big news and all this. But I was with my great friends Neil Drinkwater and Roy Jones on drums. And the Van's gig is strange because he wasn't drinking then, and then the next time I worked was in his band, he was drinking. And it brings all this, you know, it's whatever. And also he's got no tool how to explain how he wants his music to be, which is completely fine. He just gets his guitar, goes ding, 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 and you better just fall in line. And in those days, there was no Pro Tools or anything. It was on tape. So you had to go back and drop in if you'd missed the middle 8 or whatever. But, I mean, to the point, you know, there's this. He's an absolute genius. And when you're in a studio, it was one of the most incredible experiences. I did it a lot of times.
I can imagine.
Is where he goes into one and you're in the zone with him, deep in that Celtic well of soul. It's absolutely amazing. And I'm completely up for that as well. I mean, that's totally my thing. But I mean, in the meantime, he's got no idea about like tuning his guitar or anything. And he was kind of tuning it, and we're in the studio, and it's like it's going out with a piano, and I said, I was a new boy, you know, and I said, I'll tell you, Van, I've got a guitar tune here. Do you want me to tune it? And everyone went, oh, Christ. They all ducked because it's like nobody had ever said that.
That's brilliant.
And he went, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
And what happened was every time before we'd go up and listen to a take, and when it came to an end, I'd rush down and retune his guitar for him. So in the end, it was, it's got me in lots of trouble, that kind of chutzpah to go for, believe me.
I was going to say, obviously, I get the impression that he's quite blunt. And if he didn't like a particular bass part that you played, was he pretty vocal about that? I'm guessing.
Well, yes. Well, funny enough. Yeah. Well, you kind of get used to that because he, as I said, it's the music. He wants the music right, and he can't say in bar 4, can you and the crotchet there? Could you make that an F sharp? He can't do any of that. Yeah. So you have to come up with something, and and actually he's much more he's highly attuned to the vibe and the groove and things like that, and I think I am, and I think I wish I could do the gig now because I didn't know FA when I did Van's gig. And I went on my first gig with Van Morrison was at Glastonbury.
I've got this in my next question.
Have you?
Yeah.
All right, well. It was my first gig. It's Radio 1 live in concert, and it's one of the most famous live Van bootlegs.
Oh, it's so good.
It's called Rave On,
Rave On,
that was my first gig.
Yeah.
And I listen back and I think, God, you're 27 and you're very showing off massively. And I remember we were at a rehearsal studio called No Miss for like 3 days to rehearse me. And Van didn't turn up at all. And Neil Drinkwater said, well, I think we're going to be doing this one. So I'm going to, can I turn, I'm going to show you this now. I've got to show you.
Oh yeah, please do.
I've got to show you this. I've got to move things around here. This is basically it came down to 55 possible tunes in a 40-minute set at Glastonbury, right? And I had no idea. They're all in D, or it's like very, very similar. Yeah. So I wrote. This is it. This is my cheat sheet.
Wow.
Van Morrison.
Wow.
Is like 55. I used to tape it, as you can see, the gaffer tape.
Yeah, look at that.
I gaffered it to the monitor, which is why it's a bit worn. Yeah, but I thought I'm going to keep hold of that because that's kind of
that's fantastic. That's one of my favourite. And as I mentioned, it was going to be one of my next questions. Is that it was 1987 Rave On Glastonbury.
That's right.
And I just love Dweller on the Threshold on that one, and Cleaning Windows.
Yes.
It's just so groovy. And I used to love that.
I love playing that.
It's just such a great and the other track that you played on, which I think you played on this one, which was a big hit, was Someone Like You. Were you on that one?
Yeah, that's a great, isn't that a lovely tune? That's my favourite band tune.
He sings a that one.
Yeah, it's a beautiful tune. That's the first lot of recording I ever did with him for Poetic Champions. Yeah. And I did the one with Cliff as well.
Oh yeah, I love that song as well. Yeah. And the other one that I absolutely love as well, and you worked live with Tom Jones, is Sometimes We Cry. And I think you mentioned the studio that you recorded that at. Which one was that? That
was the same one. Where Van used to own that then. He bought that studio.
And Tom Jones'
your original question was, did Van ever say anything? Was he grumpy with me? And that he used to leave me alone. He could be a bully, but he used to leave me alone. And I don't know whether it's because I gave off, look, I'm working for you, don't have a go at me, I know. But that was actually Sometimes You Cry. Yeah. Is that the one? We did 2 tracks. That was for Tom's album.
Right.
Sometimes We Cry, and
the other one's like a country one. I know the one.
I can't remember. Anyway, on his Van's original, it was Van and Tom all live in the studio, big band. Pee Wee Ellis on saxophone.
Wow.
From James Brown's band. 2 drummers, which is another whole story.
I can imagine.
Another whole story. We were there 2 days. Anyway. On the original Van records, it's Alec Dankworth on double bass.
Oh, yeah.
And he plays a really lovely intro on it. So I transcribed Alec's little bass intro. And we started playing it. We started playing, and Van's not said a word. He's just wandered in. Tom, who's completely affable, and I love to death because I was his MD at the time. So,
right, so you were in Tom's
and I
band
was
at the
the
time.
only ringer.
Right.
It was all Van's band apart from me.
Oh wow.
So, we start playing, and he goes, "No." Van says, "No, stop. What, Steve? What are you playing there?" I said, "Well, it's kind of what you had on your original record." "Don't play that." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "What do you want to? What are you feeling for me to play?" When just play something interesting.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I don't know. I can't remember. I don't even know if there is a bass intro on it. Anyway, yeah, Van, bless him.
Yeah,
I
that's
love him to death.
fantastic. Yeah. So, do you have a favourite studio in all the world that you've worked in?
You know what? Well, Angel Studios is just closed.
Yeah,
Basically, studios. I love all studios, but I mean, the big studios I work in, Air Lyndhurst, Angel, Abbey Road, and of course, in my long and varied career, I've worked in lots of places that are closed now. But I mean, I've always been a great collector of the history of the music that's been recorded there. You know. I mean, you know, when we did your tracks at State of the Art.
Oh, I love that place.
You know, I mean, you know, it's not so much the studio; it's the fact that the recording, the mixing desk has got Keith Richards' phaser on.
Oh, that was fantastic, wasn't it?
Because it's come out. You know, it's like and I never go to Abbey Road without feeling humble, man. I mean, you know, the amount of music coming out of those walls are great. So no, I the people I'm working for, you know, and whether there's a parking space. Sorry to be flippant.
Obviously, you mentioned earlier on the idea that you've done a lot of film and television, and obviously I think there'll probably always be a demand for that. But obviously, the music scene has changed a lot over the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, where do you see the scene in 20 years? Because, of course, there's not the demand, I don't think, anymore for those musicians in a room playing for major label pop acts, because music's just so different now. So does that sadden you?
Well, no, the thing is, I thought, you know, whatever you think about Robbie Williams singing Frank Sinatra tunes, he actually saved the business by doing what he did for. I guess he did it because of his dad, because he wanted, you know, that's what he heard. And he's, let's face it, take that. Gary Barlow and Robbie Williams are deeply seated in the old kind of variety tradition. You know, and I think there'll always be someone like that. I mean, and. You know, whoever's coming along, someone will always fancy trying to sing like Frank Sinatra, and they'll want an orchestra and a big band behind them.
That's true.
Robbie Williams extended the life of the jazz big band. It's still massively alive, you know, and it is quite an impressive sight, isn't it? And there's nothing like standing in front of a big band while they're kicking out a swinging number. It's amazing, you know.
It really is, and obviously, we're just looking at those discs behind you, and you know, you've got such a great reputation as a musician person, and obviously you're a go-to for many producers and MDs. Right. So, I mean, what would you say the characteristics are to, you know, being successful really as a whole as a studio musician? I know we've touched on several of them.
Well, you've got, as I say, you've got to be able to provide. You've got to not make people feel nervous or insecure or feel incompetent, even though, you know, I mean, not that I would say anything, but there's just mere fact that they've all Googled me and you're that session guy. Sometimes I go in and you get a little bit of attitude, but I try and alleviate, you know, stop them thinking like that. You've got to go in where people have very little knowledge of what they're doing. They don't know they've got a song, but they don't know what bass part there is, what bass sound they want. But you know, if I get sent a demo, I'll know whether they want an old Motown-y sort of thing. I mean, yours things are always kind of like lovely, sort of warm soul R&B sounds, so I come with it ready, prepared for that. Lots of equipment, lots of being able to get the sound just like that, and not hold things up with your own ego or anything like that. I mean, that's kind of what I would say. As I say, I've been in studios where it's clear that I had a personality clash with some quite famous people, actually. But and I'm not going to talk about that. But it was clear that, and I thought, well, I'm not going to get on with you. And I you know, it's okay, get somebody else. I had to come down to that in the past, but in the end, I'm this far down the line where I work with really lovely people. And people that know what I'm like. I mean, you know, Yanto, God, man, we've done so many things together. He knows me, I know him. So and if you get the pair of us in the studio, if you could stop us sort of having a laugh, which we always do, you know, you're going to get a good track, and we're very serious about what we do. So
absolutely,
there you go.
Thank you. Well, Steve, thank you so much for chatting. This is
You're
my
welcome.
first time doing this, so I really appreciate you taking the time out to chat to me. And
you're very welcome.
Found it very informative, as have I. So thanks, Steve. Thank you.
All right, man. Nice to see you.
Share some love and motion.